The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
The international break is over and we are back to home comforts after our dramatic, and you can say that, dramatic win against Everton. From 2-0 down on the 87th minute, we won 3-2. Can we do that again? Well, hopefully we won't go 2-0 down because, let's be honest, we're lucky that it was Everton and how we could come back against them. But of course, we're facing the Blues and Chelsea this weekend at Dean Court. Now, before we get in to our opposition preview show, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. Find out more about them, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, I have got a special guest for you today, and we have got another member of the TalkSport Fan Network. It is a pleasure to welcome onto the show Chidge from the Chelsea Fancast. Welcome to the show, Chidge. How are you doing?
I'm okay, but being a Chelsea supporter at the moment is not necessarily good for one's mental health, I would say. So I'd say fair to middling.
Fair enough. And I can understand why you say that. Now, I want to cast our minds back to last season. And the last game of the season, of course, you did beat us. And, of course, it was Pochettino's last game in charge. Now, personally, hand on heart, I thought that he was getting it right. Were you of the same thought?
Without a doubt. I mean, the thing about Pochettino at Chelsea is there was always going to be a slight Spurs hang-up because obviously, you know, we're not very fond of each other. But I didn't have a problem with him because I thought he's a top level manager. I mean, everybody throws, he's never won anything, has he? You know, he always gets that. But you know, anybody who can take Spurs to a Champions League final is a good manager in my book. And he had won things at PSG, so he knew how to manage big players. Yeah. So I thought he had the track record of a top manager, and he had a terrible start. Chelsea is a complete basket case of a club since the Americans have taken over it. He had loads of young kids that he had to try and nurture, but after all, he's supposed to be good at that. But the reality is, I can't remember, but we must have won something like our last 5 games, including the last one against you guys, which just about scraped us into Europe, into this kind of Mickey Mouse Conference League. But actually, the bigger picture is if you go back to January, our form would have put us in the top 4. So from January onwards, he had turned us back into a top 4 side. Everybody seems to forget this, not least the pillocks who run the club. And off he went.
Enzo Maresca has come in, and of course, he took Leicester back up. Now, I've spoken to a number of Leicester fans, both recently and in the past when Enzo Maresca was in charge. Now, They got off to a fantastic start in the Championship. It looked as if they were probably going to get the points record in the Championship. And it all tailed off around the same sort of time as you mentioned there, where Chelsea's form picked up. And were you surprised that you went for somebody who was, I know he worked under Pep, but you could say he was still inexperienced?
Yes, I was surprised, and no, I wasn't surprised. These guys are never going to go down the road of hiring somebody like a Tuchel or even a Pochettino again. They're obsessed with data. They think the Brighton model is the one to follow in terms of running a football club. The two sporting directors are former Brighton and Monaco people, so they're trying to supplant that ideology onto us as a football club. So what they want is a young manager who, in a sense, is a mirror to the young players that they're hoarding at the moment. If I'm being cynical, I would also say giving somebody like Maresca a chance to manage a club like Chelsea means that he will kowtow to what they want, and the sporting directors, Winstanley and Stewart, are very much of that ilk. You know, it's their way or the highway. He's more coach than manager, so he won't threaten them in terms of that either. He doesn't seem to be that bothered from what, I mean, we can only go on what we read. I mean, obviously none of us are there, but it seems that he's pretty happy to be told who he's going to get to coach. So, you know, he fits their model really, really well. Only time will tell whether he fits Chelsea's model. But, I mean, the thing is, I mean, you know, you, like me, you've been watching football a long time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Chelsea effectively died in, June 2022. The Chelsea that you know, the Chelsea that I know, died. This lot have ripped it up and started it all from scratch in their own way. You know what? We've got some decent players. There's no doubt about that. I mean, look at Palmer. I mean, bringing him in was fantastic. Gusto's a good player. There's plenty of good. Madueke, made his England debut in the week. There's some really, really good players. Maresca may gel them. He may get us playing decent football. We may win. But however we do it, it's that the Chelsea that I've known for the last 20 years is gone. I'm pretty sure of it.
Let's talk about the owners, because the owners are, to be honest, when you look from the outside, I agree with you. It looks like a complete and utter basket case. Long contracts. Of course, Enzo Fernandez, and we'll come on to him in a moment, is signed up until 2031. That's ridiculous. That's 7 years away from now. 7 years. My maths isn't that great, to be honest, Chidge, but but it seems crazy. But also, and this is a big concern that I saw the other day, is the talk of them selling Stamford Bridge to themselves. Now, why I bring this up is there's a number of teams, and they're all Championship teams, to be fair, and League One now, some of them. Bolton Wanderers, Derby County, and Reading. Those three teams have got something in common, and is that they all sold their ground to their owners. And are you really worried that Todd Boehly doing this it's just a huge risk, if he ever wants to sell up?
Well, there's so much in this, and I'll try and keep it distilled for you, because you don't want me on this show for 3 hours, which is what it would take. But number one, I mean, we've been spoiled as supporters because, for 20 years with Roman Abramovich, we just had an exceedingly rich guy who didn't care whether he made any money or not because he'd always fund the losses.
Yeah.
We now have a private equity fund, Clear Lake Capital or a capital markets fund. So they basically get people to invest, and then they invest their money into a project, and then their aim is to get as big a return on that as possible. So that's what I mean when I say the Chelsea that we used to know is gone, because it's everything about this is a business. The other misconception is that Todd Boehly appeared to be I mean, I wasn't involved with the bid per se, but I'm on the board of the Supporters Trust, and they were heavily involved with talking to every single one of the people who bid for Chelsea. Boehly fronted that. He owns personally 13% of the club. There are another two investors, Mark Waters and some guy called Weiss from Switzerland, who make it up to about 35%, and the rest is owned by Clearlake Capital. The press seem to have got it under their, noodle that it's all about Todd Boehly. He was very hands-on and very involved at the beginning. He kind of was the interim sporting director for the first 6 months or so, first window certainly. But he's taken a back seat since then. The main protagonists are Joe Feliciano, but more to the point, Begdad Eghbali. And Eghbali's a micromanager. He's very, very hands-on. His knowledge of football, you can probably hide under a postage stamp. But whatever's happening at Chelsea at the moment, it is all to do with return on investment and monetizing the brand and growing the brand. They've been cutting costs across the board. There have been employees who have been at that club for generations who have gone. It's a very unhappy camp. And in terms of selling things on, they're obviously, because they spent about $1.5 billion on young, untried talent in the main.
Yeah.
And they're very worried, like a lot of Premier League clubs are, about PSR. So they're trying to balance the books. So they sold one of the hotels that we've got on the stadium, floor, kind of ground back to themselves, because they did it as an intercompany deal. I think the women's team they've done the same with. They'll probably look at Cobham and all of these kind of things. And I mean, if you're being benign about it, you could say, well, it's just clever accounting and they're trying to avoid, getting walloped by PSR. However, you're right. None of us trust them as far as we could throw them. I don't think that they have the best interest of this club at hand. I think they have the best interest of their investors at hand. That's all they care about. So, yeah, it really worries me. And there was a lot of talk this week, as you probably understood, about the new stadium development, which was basically written into the contract when they bought the club for $2.5 billion plus another $2 billion or whatever it was, that they had to build a stadium or redevelop Stamford Bridge, really. But there's been a lot of hoo-ha about they're interested in relocating to Earls Court, which, if you know the area, is about a mile up the road, which, I suspect many supporters wouldn't have too much trouble with. It's all a load of rubbish. Earls Court site is owned by the Earls Court Development Fund, or whatever they're called, and they've had plans there for years to build a big kind of load of social housing, commercial housing, retail units, you name it. It's also very political because Hammersmith and Fulham Council are involved. There's a council estate that would have to be demolished if Chelsea. I mean, this is so not going to happen unless, there's something that I don't know about it. So really, I think what's happened this week, as you probably also know, is that Todd Boehly's decided that he wants to buy out Clearlake and have sole control of the club, which is hard because he's a minority shareholder. Clearlake, as in Eghbali and Feliciano, said, no, we're not selling our shares. We'll rather buy you out. So what you've now got being played out in public is a PR war going on. And I think that the news about Chelsea talking to Earls Court was purely part of that PR war. Distract the supporters away from the civil war that's going on and dangle the carrot of Earls Court. It's not going to happen. And I've seen plans for a 65,000-seater stadium on the current site that's doable and would be fantastic. And remember, we had planning permission under Roman to develop a 62,000-seater stadium there. What happened was he got fed up because the government were already having a go at him. So he stopped investing. So that's what stalled that. But we had planning permission for a 62,000-seater stadium in Stamford Bridge, so we know it can be done. The question is, will this lot, want to stump up what will probably cost them about $1 billion, $1.5 billion to do it? Or do they want to take their money, as much money as they can out of the club and run?
They are spending, and Chelsea has spent a hell of a lot of money, like you say, on these young, untried players. But Chelsea traditionally, and Chelsea fans, I know, will be expecting the club to be competing for the Premier League title.
Yeah.
That's without a shadow of a doubt. Now, if you gave that money to, Manchester City and allowed somebody, whoever does the transfers at Manchester City, they would build a team which is capable, or if not, if they started from where they were years ago when they were shit, they would be able to build a team which is going to compete. Might not win it straight away, but compete. But this team, it doesn't feel like it's going to do that.
Football, Craig.
Mm.
Exactly. The Clear Lake Capital are not building a team to challenge for the Premier League or the European Champion. The Champions League. They are not doing that. They are building a team to make money. They're hoping that some of these punts that they've made on these young players, that out of the, let's say they've bought, I don't know how many they've bought, but let's say it's 50. They're hoping that maybe 5 to 10 of them will become world superstars, and they will cash in on them. They are not designing a team to challenge for the title. They are designing a team to make them money on their investment.
But the club's getting weaker each year.
No shit.
This. Yeah,
you noticed.
Yeah, it's just they had something good under Poch that I'm not being critical of Chelsea as a football club here. I'm being critical of the owners. They had something good under Poch. They've bought in Enzo Maresca, who's done all right at Leicester, with a already strong team, managed to get them over the line or stumble them over the line. There just doesn't seem to be any logic. And some of these contracts, I'm just having a look at some of the contracts now of the players at Chelsea. Most of them are 2030 onwards. Cole Palmer, yeah, okay, 2033, you could say, absolutely fine. But there's players there that you think, well, because the devaluation of a player is going to happen, after a certain period of time, I just don't get what they're aiming for.
Well, the reason they're doing it ostensibly is to amortize the transfer fee cost over a longer period of time. So in other words, a 70 million player over 7 years is 10 million a year. So they can write off 10 million a year.
Yeah.
They're also doing it because, and I think actually, if I'm being fair, I like to think I'm fair-minded. They're trying to get the wage cost down. I think that they decided that spiraling salary costs, paying players 300, 400, 500 grand a week is not sustainable. Or, if one's being cynical, is not going to allow them to make enough profit. So they're reducing the wage cost down to around or under about 100 grand a player. And what they're doing is they're incentivizing them with a very long contract and also all sorts of performance-related bonuses. And the other thing that they're doing is that they got stiffed totally by, because of the sanctions, Chelsea weren't really able to tie down Antonio Rudiger and Andreas Christensen down to a contract renewal. So they left for Real Madrid and Barcelona on a free. And of course, that's an anathema to Clear Lake because it's like money walking out the door, which they just can't bear.
Yeah.
So the other reason that they're doing it is that it retains the value in the player so that they don't get caught, because they'll, basically, if you don't sign within it with a year to go, then you're off, basically. So it gives them, a bit of security of tenure because it's a longer contract, which they can then kind of, they won't leave it to the last minute before a player goes. So there's method in their madness there. I mean, I would counter to that, Craig, which goes back to my original argument about them not building a team to win the Champions League or the Premier League. The team that wins the title most years are the team that pays the biggest salaries and have the better players as a consequence. I rest my case.
Let's go on to Enzo Fernandez because, of course, he was caught up in some controversy back in July, which, to be honest, I haven't watched, the video that was put out, and neither do I want to. But there was a lot of anger. He did, I believe, make a sizable payment to an anti-discrimination charity, offered an apology. Has he been forgiven by the Chelsea fans? And do you feel that because you spent so much money on him, do you feel that it's devalued him so much that you're stuck with him for the whole duration?
Well, I think in football, the player's value is related to what he does on the pitch.
Yeah.
I think most supporters were pretty disappointed, to put it mildly, about his behaviour,
Mhm.
and even more disappointed with the way the club dealt with it, because it seems to have been brushed under the carpet. Oh, pay a bit of money to the foundation, everything will be forgotten. His teammates clearly were very upset about it,
Yeah.
quite rightly so. And I mean, one of the things that, in some respects, about the only decent thing that's happened since Clear Lake took over is that they've reorganized the Chelsea Foundation. They've got Danny Finkelstein running it now, who's a good guy.
Mhm.
And it does fantastic work, always has done fantastic work in and around the community, but it seems to be doing even better work now. And a big part of that is anti-discrimination. I mean, Roman started that off. He did a lot of very good work in anti-racism, anti-discrimination. And we've got a player called Paul Canaville, who used to play for us in the 80s, who was, would
Yes.
you believe it, racially abused by his own supporters, etc., etc. They do great work with him. So I think that their stance on what happened was disappointing. And the suspicion is he's their boy. He's their star boy, isn't he? We've got a
Mhm.
World Cup winning player playing for us. They made him captain. I mean, I think that's the thing. After that, they then made him captain in the absence of Reece James. I think that's what stuck in our craw somewhat. And he's certainly been a good player for Argentina. He's not shown Chelsea, I don't think, anything like what we would expect of a player who was bought for over 100 million and comes with a World Cup winning CV. So, I think he's held in higher regard by the club than the supporters. That's for sure.
You have made, and I can see 10 incoming transfers, although being Chelsea, it might be more. There might be some more that I've missed off, to
Well,
be honest,
if they
Chidge.
do that, would be quite a feat, because the transfer window's shut now.
Yeah, but during the summer, there's 10 players, and a couple of those players, I think are good quality. Pedro Neto, for
Good signing.
example,
Yeah.
very, very good signing. Kieran Dewsbury Hall, I think he was no.
Why sell Conor Gallagher
Yeah.
for Dewsbury Hall? I mean, it's
Mm,
just unbelievable. And I mean, Conor was sold because he was pure profit. That's why.
yeah.
But he was he was our second best player last season, and he was the captain for most of the season. It really pissed a lot of the fans off. But Dewsbury Hall, if indeed he is the replacement for Conor, which is a moot point, he's
Mhm.
not fit to lace his boots, from what
Fair
I've
enough.
seen so far.
What do you think of the other signings?
Well, let's just talk about the serious ones, shall we?
Yeah.
Neto, I'm very pleased with. He's a
Yeah.
proven Premier League player. I like the look of him, although he comes into an area where we're pretty stacked with wide players at the moment. Dewsbury Hall, from what I've seen, I'm not that impressed, but you can't really judge a player on a handful of games, and I understand that. I think Felix and Sancho are whopping great big gambles. I think their talent is not in doubt at
Yeah.
all. But Felix has failed at every club he's been to. Atletico Madrid, Barcelona. He was on loan with us,
Mhm.
and wasn't hugely impressive. He's a bit of a kind of a YouTuber player. It's all
Yeah.
nice flicks and stuff, or as I prefer to say, all fart and no shit. So
Fair enough.
um, but I mean, look. The bottom line is, Craig, I'm a Chelsea supporter. I want all of these players to do well. I want them all to
Mhm.
be fantastic and score goals, create goals, because if they do that, we'll be successful, and I shall fall in love with all of them. But I think Felix is a gamble. I think Sancho, again, another very talented player, did really well at Dortmund, didn't he, when he went on loan there last season?
Yeah.
Has played for England, uh, you know. So I mean, but he, there's a lingering suspicion about his attitude after United. But then they're a basket case too, like us. So maybe you shouldn't hold that against him. I mean, he's a gamble, and I think they bought him as a gamble because they got him quite cheap, and or they can get him quite cheap, and that maybe his value will increase. So those are the four kind of main ones, aren't they? I mean, the rest were just kids that they all, unknown players from Brazil who they think are going to be brilliant in 10 years' time that they've loaned off, or bloody goalkeepers. We had about 9 goalkeepers at one stage.
Yeah.
And none of them are any good.
Well, we've got Kepa.
Yeah, of course you have. That's right.
Yeah, of course he
I
won't be
almost
able to play. He won't be able to play on Saturday. But
that's lucky for you, really.
Yeah. I'm guessing you're not a big fan.
He had a good crack at it. He was a bit curate's egg. When he was good, he was very, very good. But when he was bad, he was horrid. We used to call him smoke hands.
Yeah.
Because the number of time he made a save and his hands disappeared. But, he had some good performances too. I mean, he pretty much helped us win the Europa League in the penalty shootout. And then he lost the League Cup against Liverpool because he fired one into Cricklewood. So he is not, we've had some brilliant goalkeepers at the club. I mean, obviously Petr Cech, very few are going to hold a candle to him. And maybe it's unfair to compare him to Cech, but I mean, Courtois was another great keeper, but a very distinctly unpleasant individual. I mean, I tell you what's really annoying is we had a keeper towards the end of last season called Petrovic, who was quite a young keeper, Serbian, I think. Yeah. And, we quite liked him. He looked like a proper goalkeeper. He's about 6'6". He kept a lot of shots out. Like a lot of modern goalkeepers, was not brilliant playing out from the back, but he wasn't a real disaster. The irony is they've got Sanchez in goal, who was Brighton's third goalkeeper, who has been brought in as some kind of guru of playing out from the back. He makes at least 2 errors every game, which invariably cost us a goal because he can't play out from the back. And they're all saying he's the best keeper we've got to play out from the back. I mean, this is the trouble with this club at the moment. Everybody in that club, kind of, supporter facing, they gaslight you. We get gaslit the whole time. Roberto Sanchez is the best keeper playing at the back. We go to the games. We see him pass it to the opposition forward, who then scores. What are you talking about? But that's the club at the moment. It's bonkers, mate.
It does seem absolutely crazy that, players that are looking good, then sold, and it doesn't make any sense, to be perfectly honest, Chidge.
But Craig, I mean, this is going to sound really down and negative, but the reality is there are still some good players.
Yeah.
Colwill is a good player, I think. Will get better, put it that way. Fofana looks a good player if he can stay fit. Gusto's a good player. We've got Lavia in midfield, who, again, if he can stay fit, looks a class act. Fernandez is not crap. He's just not as good as we need him to be. Caicedo, I like a lot. He's a good player. Cole Palmer is already world class. Madueke's a good right winger. Neto, we know, is a good player. Jackson's probably going to get better, but not good enough for Chelsea as a number 9 yet. Felix can work in the number 10. I mean, there are areas around the squad where we're distinctly lacking, and the thing that worries me is that we don't really have a spine of a team. That the goalkeeper's a weakness. There's no centre forward as that's a weakness. I still think we're light in a proper defensive midfield player. I mean, we've got a lot of kind of players you can play number 10, a lot of players you can play wide, but no striker. So there are holes, but around those holes there are good players. I mean, and you could say on paper, if Maresca gets his shit together, this is a team that should be competing for the top 4.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. But of course, results so far haven't looked too great. Pre-season, to be honest, pre-season, I think you can say, well, at the end of the day, results are he was probably trying to find his best team. Okay, there was just the one win. But so far, Manchester City can understand that. They've got dominance. A great win against Wolves, to be fair. But that 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace just before the international break is where I'm thinking, well, have Chelsea improved or have they gone backwards? And we play a very, very high press. We've, of course, coming off the back of a fantastic win against Everton, where we was 2-0 down. We've thrown our toys out the pram, to be perfectly honest.
Did
I
you
was
go? Were you
furious.
up there?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't, but I was furious. I was furious. I was watching it, and then all of a sudden, the spark was lit, and it just turned
Yeah.
round. And it was because of this intensity that we can play, that tenacity that we can play. Are you worried about playing Bournemouth, considering what we can do?
Uh, well, it's a good question, Craig. I mean, I think the point of the moment with Chelsea is, well, which Chelsea will turn up. I mean,
Hmm.
they were in the game against City for about 75 minutes
Yeah,
until City put the second away. So I thought actually they played a lot better than they were given credit for. Wolves, they were same old Chelsea in the first half, i.e., we leak goals. But second half, we were absolutely superb. We absolutely buried them, and I think you saw what Chelsea can be as an attacking unit in that second half.
yeah.
Palace was same old story from the last few seasons. We created more than enough chances. We should have been 3-0 up at half time. The game would have been dead and buried. But because we can't put the ball in the net, because guess what? We don't have a proper striker. Palace changed. I mean, Palace, they were lucky actually, because Will Hughes should have been sent off for a second
Hmm.
bookable offence. And the manager took him off immediately and brought on Doucouré. And he changed the game because he ran the midfield from there on after, and it turned the game around. And they scored a great goal. Eze's goal was superb, although we could have done better with it, arguably. But it was a good goal, well taken. And that's what you get with Chelsea at the moment. They don't bury teams. They don't put the game away. They leave themselves vulnerable to somebody scoring. Palace came for a draw and just sat back after that and made it impossible for us to score. But there's another thing too, which worries me still. I think there's a distinct lack of leaders in that team, largely because they're so young and there's no experience there. So, when Palace equalised, it was like they didn't know what to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes. They kind of floundered around and shat themselves, basically. I mean, they got it back together, to be fair. I think Maresca made a few good substitutions, but they're a very schizophrenic team. I think they can definitely be got at. It worries me that you press high,
Yeah.
because Maresca obviously, wants to play out from the back, and I don't think they're good enough to do it. I don't see players in there who can put up with a team that can really press well, and we'll probably go for it. So the other thing about the midfield, if Fernandez and Caicedo play together, which I would imagine they will, and if he gives Fernandez a free rein, which he often tends to do, then they're going. I mean, this is why we all thought that Caicedo was rubbish until we realised what was actually happening was that Fernandez has no discipline, and Caicedo gets left on his own, and teams just take advantage of that. And that we will want, teams will cut through us like a knife through butter.
Yeah.
So that worries me. But I've also seen Fernando's play, because if you're going to play with two defensive midfielders, they need to be close to each other. They've got to work as a partnership. So I think if he can do that, that tightens us up a bit. But the other thing is, of course, they're all still trying to get the head round the way Maresca wants to play. We just had an international break, so half the team will have been away. I was going to, if I'd had time today, I was going to try and do some research to see what our results are like when we come back from international breaks. But my hunch is badly. So I would be encouraged if I was a Bournemouth fan.
Well, that's good news for us. And, from what you said, it's all very, very positive for us, because that's the way we beat Manchester United last year. They played from the back, and we just put them under instant pressure up at Old Trafford. And to be honest, we should have beaten them at Dean Court as well. Should have beaten them at Dean Court if it was not for a very, very dodgy handball decision and a penalty that should have been given to us, and was deemed to be outside the box. But of course, the motion was going into the box. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a gripe about not being able to do the double over Manchester United last year, but it sounds very, very positive. And I think if Pochettino was in charge this season, I think Chelsea would have got off to a better start. You would have beaten Palace, I think. Manchester City would have probably given them more of a run than you probably did. But I think Pochettino probably would have known how to get a decent result down at Dean Court. With Maresca, who knows? And I think it's all positive. Chidge, we're going to have to predict this game. Sorry to ask you. I'm sorry that it sounds so negative, but to be honest, I can understand. And from reading what Chelsea fans have been putting on Twitter, or as we call it, X, and knowing a lot of Chelsea fans myself, I can understand the frustrations because it seems like the ownership is a mess. Nobody really knows what it's doing. It seems like leadership has to start from the top. So how do you think this is going to go?
Well, I mean, I think most football supporters, doesn't matter who they support, are able to separate off and on the pitch stuff. I can be as miserable as sin at the moment because Chelsea haven't kicked a ball for over a week, and all I've had in the media is this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But if we go to Bournemouth on Saturday, I mean, it's so hard to get a bloody ticket, as you well know. I've managed to make it down there. It's also because I'm in Winchester. It's almost like a local game for me. So I quite like pootling down on the train to go to that one. But I haven't got a ticket for Saturday. But if I had, we could go down there and we could win, and you don't care about what's going on off the pitch. You forget about that because you're too busy talking about and thinking about and enjoying what you've seen on the pitch. So there is a separation there. I mean, they're almost impossible to predict. I mean, what I would say, Craig, is that I have a suspicion, although I could be wrong because it's early days yet. I have a suspicion that Chelsea might be a much better team away from home this year than they were last year. One thing I've noticed already about Maresca, which I really like, he's getting the players to move the ball forward a lot more quickly, and I do think we've got. I mean, our attacking players minus the striker and kind of it's that kind of area between the midfield, the central midfielders, defensive midfielders, and the number 9. We're very strong there, and I think we've got players who can put it away, like we did against Wolves. And I think away from home we're going to prove better, but I'm not convinced we can shut teams out. So I mean, this is the point. This is why it's so hard to predict. I mean, this could either be, Bournemouth have taken us apart in the past. I mean, I remember the 4-0, which was horrific. And they just did it by picking us off. And you could easily do that. It could be a very high-scoring draw. It could be a 2-2, 3-3 kind of draw. Mm-hmm. Or we could thump you. I mean, we could do to you what we did to Wolves. And honest to God, I have no idea which one it will be. Because until... you see what Chelsea's turned up, it's impossible to say. But if you're going to... we do this Prem Predictions League, so I'm duty-bound to give predictions for that. I haven't started yet, but I'm going to on Friday. But I'm going to go 4-2. How about that to us?
4-2. 4-2. Yeah. I didn't expect anything different, to be honest.
Well, I've got to say we're going to 4-2.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Well, of course, I'm going to back my own team. I am going to say it's going to be a tighter game. I reckon it'll be a 2-1 win to Bournemouth. Although, one thing, of course, that Everton game sticks in my mind. Yeah, great comeback. Now, if we play like we did in the last 8 minutes, which was probably 8 of the best minutes of Premier League football that we've seen from this club, including the time from Eddie Howe, we can beat, I would say most teams apart from Manchester City, because we can't, do anything against them. That's providing we play like that for 90 minutes. If we play like we did for the preceding 87 minutes, you will absolutely stuff us because you're a much better side than Everton. Let's be honest, Everton are shit. So we picked probably the best team to actually do that to. But I don't think Andoni Iraola is going to make that mistake again. And I think he probably has realised he's got away with one there just because the opposition was that poor. So, yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-1 win. So yeah, but you didn't expect anything different.
No, I didn't. I mean, that'll be your first win against us at home since the 4-0, won't it, in 2019?
It would. It would.
But we've had all sorts of results since. It's been mad. It was 0-0 last year, wasn't it?
Yep.
3-1 the year before that. 2-1 to us. 2-2 draw.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of we'll see. I mean, Chelsea are unpredictable again because, of course, everybody likes to predict on the basis of history. But like I said, you can't do that anymore. You have to year zero was 2022.
Yeah. Well, the thing, we had a decent record, didn't we, at Stamford Bridge for a number of years. And,
yes,
it was, very, very good times. But I think, I think that Maresca will do an okay job. I hope he does for you guys. However, there has to be some sort of organisation at the top level. And that, I apologise for having to say that, Chidge, but I'm probably not saying anything that Chelsea fans aren't thinking anyway.
They're the biggest problem at the club at the moment. But like I said, the reality is, as you well know, you've been supporting football for a long time. If the results on the pitch cheer us up, everybody forgets about that. So there you go.
Exactly.
Forza Maresca.
Exactly. Well, just before you go, Chidge, please do tell everybody where they can find Chelsea Fancast.
Easy to do. We're live on our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, and something called Mixler every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. And then pretty shortly afterwards, it goes out as a podcast, which you can get on Acast, Spotify, Apple, all good podcast providers, and all the rubbish ones too. And it's at Chelsea Fancast on all the social media.
Perfect. And you're part of the TalkSport fan network as well, aren't you? So, yes. Yeah, your podcasts probably go to all the same places as well too.
No doubt.
I know Spotify, I know Apple, but the rest of them,
there's loads that I've not even heard of. People tell me that's where they listen to it. I go, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I've had that as well. I was looking, I typed in the channel name and I was like, where's that? I've never heard of that. Did I upload it to it? No, that's where it's from. But Chidge, it's been a pleasure. And
no problem.
We shall see you tomorrow as well. And please go and subscribe to Chelsea Fancast because I will be on there tomorrow as well. So, looking forward to that.
Me too. Take care.
And you as well. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this show. Please hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here up the Cherries in all departments. Now, we do have lots of special interviews on here. We've had Damon Minchella, Ocean Colour Scene. Any Chelsea fans want to watch about Michael Greco? We did interview him last season. We've had Richard Archer from Hardfight, Adam Devlin from the Blue Tones, Tom Meehan from Kasabian, Omid Dalili. Believe it or not, he's not only a Chelsea fan, he also supports Ipswich Town. So there we go. Do take a watch of that. We've had Tiff Nadell, and we've had lots more special guests. And of course, we have had a very, very special guest as well that was interviewed yesterday. So please do go check that out. It is in the interviews tab below. So do go and check that out now. Like I say, hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button below. It helps this channel to grow. It is free. And we shall see you in the next one. Thank you for joining us.
The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.